trenches. Let's make a righteous ruckus.
Hi, welcome to the Righteous Ruckus podcast. I'm your host, Riley Lowe, and this is a big day. I have my first guest, inaugural guest here today, Courtney Lowe. If the last name sounds familiar, it's because she is my wife.
Yes.
So, I'm actually titling this, I haven't told her, but I'm going to interview with a psycho. Psycho meaning psychotherapist. Heavy on the psychotherapist. You see the reaction. That's why I waited to tell her I'm going to title this. But I figure, some people might be interested when it says interview with a psycho. But anyway, this is my wife, Courtney Lowe. Say hi, Courtney.
Hello. Nice to talk to you all.
All right. And I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of get her perspective on what she does and ask her a few questions. And I think it's going to be some things that you guys will find interesting as well. So I guess the first thing to knock it out. Oh, so what do you do for a living?
I am a psychotherapist.
Okay.
And so I see adults and I see teens, usually above 16. I see families. I see couples.
Okay. And you're a Christian, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are you like a Christian therapist, or are you a therapist that's a Christian, or?
Therapist that's a Christian.
Okay.
I don't identify as a Christian therapist.
Yeah. But you do, if somebody was to need it, you do like some Christian therapy
Yes.
if you need it?
Yep.
Okay. That's cool. So what launched you kind of down the path of being this whole psychotherapy, the whole counseling thing? What was the moment where you're like, hey, that's what I want to do with my life?
I always tell people that this job picked me. I did not pick it. And basically what launched me down it was living in chaos. Okay. And coming from a very volatile home.
So this is growing up.
And yes,
Okay.
Growing up, I can take you back to the high school or the middle school I was in 7th grade, the exact spot where I decided I was going to be something in psychology. Although I didn't really know what psychology was, it was more about me studying the human behavior at the time, but realizing what I lived in versus what a lot of my friends lived in were entirely different situations. Okay. So I could take you right to that spot. I have never changed my path. I went right into this. And
so once you found out that psychology was just kind of the study of human behavior, and maybe you could even have a chance to impact people that had undergone or been through the same kind of things you had, and you said, okay, that's what I want to do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Lots of trauma.
And was there, like, especially, I know it sounds like early on that you may not had strong Christian convictions when you chose psychology, or like you say, psychology chose you. Was there ever a conflict? Have you seen any kind of a conflict between your Christian beliefs and just the psychology world in general? Do you ever run into stuff like that?
With me?
Mm-hmm.
Early on, yeah, I didn't. I was raised to kind of go either way, really. So that said, when I became a Christian and I've grown in my Christian faith, there's a lot of things that I've seen. That being said, early on in my studies, I didn't see that many issues. I saw a few issues, but
so nothing really stuck out for you, but that the more you mature as a Christian, then there's things that you're like, that's kind of screwy.
Yes.
What they're doing there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Pushing the envelope.
And what demographic do you is there a preference, or do you generally work with a certain demographic?
Those with PTSD, severe trauma, suicidality. I love just working with depression, anxiety, but a lot of that PTSD and trauma and grief are my niches. And there's trauma in all grief.
Okay. Can there be a spiritual side to psychological issues? Like, have you seen people coming to you and you're addressing like the brain science of it, but you also know and can tell that there's a spiritual side to certain aspects as well? Is there anything like that?
What do you mean?
Well, like, is there anything where somebody's saying, hey, struggling with depression, and once you get going down the root causes, then there's some sort of a spiritual facet to it, is I guess is what I'm saying. Like, is there somebody that's saying, hey, I struggle with depression, I was raised a Christian, but I'm not a Christian now. And is there any instance like that where you're able to?
Several. Yes, because I see a lot of atheists, a lot of agnostics who grew up in the Christian faith, and some of them with just trauma in faith, honestly, with the church.
So they've had a bad experience with Christians, and that's made them turn away from the faith.
Yes, and that's where, if we start to unravel it, where I view everyone as an onion, and I explain that to them, that's where, with some of them, we get to.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. It's interesting to me that it seems like the reason somebody might become an atheist is because they're hurt by somebody in the church or some sort of church teachings from their childhood, and so they just decide to shun the whole thing, kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater sort of deal.
And not always with just the church itself, but with just trauma and grief and life, what they've been through.
Yeah.
Like, how can God let me go through something like this if God is such a loving God?
Yeah. Wow. Now let's say a Christian was to need to seek counseling from somebody like you. Hopefully they would be able to find somebody like you who is a Christian and has that sort of moral compass. You tell me, have you seen a prevalence of non-Christian or liberal and just crazy out there ideologies and worldviews in the world of psychology?
Yeah. I have, I always tell people, in my world, it's a very lonely world. And I'm one of the very few that I talk the truth. I pull for honesty, and I don't meddle with a lot of confusion. That said, though, do I have patients who believe in global warming, things that go against morale, my morals? Absolutely. But is that what they're there for? And that's what I have to ask myself. And that's what they have to tell me.
Okay. Is there any kind of guidance you could give a Christian that says, hey, I think I need something more than just speaking to a pastor or somebody at my church? I think I need something. Maybe there is some sort of chemicals going on or PTSD that I need to find to be addressed. But they don't want that liberal worldview to be forced on them. Is there any kind of, like, let's say somebody went in and they just scrolled through the phone book from back when we had phone books and picked out a name in the psychology world and said, okay, I'm calling this person. They made an appointment. Is there anything that you think they could do to kind of weed out and feel out whether this person that's supposed to be helping them actually is going to help them, or if they're going to try to push them into a liberal strain of thought?
Most people actually will ask me straight up if I have some sort of agenda, or if am I liberal? Am I extreme? What are my beliefs? A lot of people will ask me straight up. So I don't even have to vet them necessarily as they're vetting me. So it kind of goes the opposite way. That said, most people, though, can come in, and as soon as I start talking to them, they'll say comments like, oh, well, we know exactly where you stand, or you're different, so we're going to go with that.
So they can sense that you're not of that persuasion where you're going to be shoving that sort of thing down their throats.
No,
and also it's good.
Some ask that.
So it's probably good to be bold and to be brave, especially if you're there to get help, right? The doctor or the psychologist is working for you, so you're not really working for them. And so it's good to be upfront and almost brash and say, so do you have an agenda? I mean, it'd be better that than get a month, 2 months into treatment and realize that they're steering you down some sort of crazy path.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
then you've got a setback.
Exactly.
So now do you think, now I mentioned like somebody getting therapy in addition to getting counseling from their pastor or somebody at their church. Do you think it's good, especially for a Christian, to have maybe focus, I don't know, I guess more on the biblical side of things with the pastor, and then also they can be getting things from their pastor and from you?
Oh, I've
Do you
seen.
think that's a good?
Yes, it is, and a lot of my Christians, if they are going to church, that's something I always applaud them for, anyways. But that being said, too, is even if they're not going to church, I mean, I tell people I've learned a lot more about life outside of church than I have in church, but depending on what they're going through, a lot of times I'll say, listen, you need more than just this. You need outside counsel at your church. You need somebody with the more biblical knowledge than what I can give you, and they'll seek that. That said, though, some of them come in and they've said, you know what, I've tried Christian counseling. I'm tired of being told, just pray about it. Just pray about it. And I need somebody with some knowledge with what's going on in my head, because my mind is broken.
Yeah. Wow.
My body is broken.
That's understandable. Now, speaking along those lines, have you had the opportunity to maybe lead people that came from a Christian background and now they've fallen away? Have you been able to steer them back towards Christ?
Yes.
Have you had that opportunity?
Yes, a few times. And I don't push for that, obviously. However, that said, yes.
But you're open to it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if the
and
opportunity
I have
presents
actually
itself.
asked people, and I've had people ask me, what is your testimony? I've asked them, what is your testimony? And some people can tell me their testimony. They've just never accepted Jesus Christ into their hearts. And I can lead them to that.
Wow, that's awesome. So this is so much more than just a job for you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
This is
so
not a
much-
job to me.
This
I don't
is
consider
this is
this
a
a job
calling.
to me.
Yeah, this is a calling for you.
Yes.
And quite frankly, it's somewhat of a ministry for you.
In a way, yes.
It's funny how God is able to use this path that you've taken to potentially help lead people to Christ. And I think that's something for, there's probably people that are watching and listening that they're saying psychology, whatever, that's not for me. I have no interest in that. But yet they work, at an automotive factory, or they're a mechanic, or they're a carpenter, or they're a school teacher, and they're sitting here going, what could God use me for? And here you've been, simply by being open to that opportunity, it seems like you've had those opportunities presented to you where you're able to help people out.
And I actually see right now, I'm seeing more men than I am women.
Wow. Is that generally the way it works, or is it usually mostly women that seek?
It's usually
Is it like a 50-50,
40,
or is
30.
it usually, 40. As a man, I could see it
40,
being
60.
tough for a man to say, okay, I need help. That's generally something men don't do, is say, I need help.
And the majority of men I see will say that right out the bat.
Yeah. And
Right
you're able to kind of take the scalpel to that and get down into the heart of the issue.
Yes, because vulnerability for men is key. And no, that's not usually what I see. It's made a turnaround in the last 2 years with men coming into me.
Wow.
But I also work with first responders too. So I'm linked heavily with the PD and with fire.
So those are
EMT.
people that have had significant amounts of trauma just in a daily basis from their job, right?
Yep.
They're in that day in, day out. They see some of the worst of society.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a treatment that you've seen that has the best effect on those sorts of people? Is there anything in particular?
I've done a lot of EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
Say that again.
EMDR,
And what-
eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It was developed by Francine Shapiro. I do a lot of that. That is very helpful, but the key usually lies further back than just their trauma. And I'm trained a lot in parts work, ego state, IFS. I take what works the best out of all three of those and I put them in with EMDR. And that's working with the inner child.
Okay, so you're getting way back. You're trying to figure out the way back to the root of the problem.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Yeah.
once you figure that out, then you can use this EMDR and some other techniques to help address the situation.
Or I just go into EMDR and we figure it out.
Oh, and that helps. So it's almost like using the EMDR to find out the root cause too, huh?
Yes, because
Wow.
EMDR will launch us into the subconscious so much quicker, usually within 10 seconds. And so that's usually what I do. Now, some people, though, that come to me, they're more in a catatonic state, meaning they can't talk a lot. So I want them to explore their narrative with me verbally before. But some people, it's the opposite. I have to read it. I have to read them. And then if they have a preference based
So
off
it's somewhat of an art as well as a science.
Yeah.
So it comes with experience and knowledge and having a Christian worldview, having morality can help you piece together everything. Wow, that's interesting. Well, I think we're about out of time, but if somebody has any questions, they can either email me in the description or they can also comment. And like I said, spoiler alert, Courtney is my wife. So we will respond, together jointly through probably the Righteous Ruckus username. But anyway, it's been a pleasure having you on, and it's exciting to have my first guest.
Thank you.
And,
yes,
yeah.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure for me too.
Oh, good. Well,
Yeah.
That's about it. And actually, to close out, I've often used... This has kind of come up organically. I tried a couple different ways to close out my show, and the T-shirt that has the slogan "Make Heaven Crowded" that I've kind of leaned into and started using that recently. That actually came off of a T-shirt that Courtney bought. Mm-hmm. So I really love that. So kind of a bloom where you're planted sort of deal is what I'm hearing through Courtney's life is God's bringing these opportunities to her, and God is able to use her in a space that's kind of overrun with liberalism in order to help people and help make heaven crowded.